Hey, U.S. History B students, Mr. P here, and I'd like you to go ahead and grab your notes, your slideshow notes. Normally, we'd be doing something like this live, but due to my absence and also it being an asynchronous day, I wanted to take advantage of using some of the new video tools the teachers have been learning and post a video for you guys. So I'm gonna kind of be like Mr. Kilborn, who posts videos all the time. So anyway, get out your slideshow notes. We were talking about the Prohibition era when we last left each other. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and start this slideshow. And maybe if I can get it to start here on the current slide. And I know that you've seen this slide already, but I'm going to go ahead and just quickly review it. Remember, the term prohibition is prohibition of alcohol, meaning alcohol was prohibited. It was outlawed. 18th Amendment of the Constitution, enforced by the Volstead Act, and will end up lasting basically through the decade of the 1920s. And you see here in this photo, right after the law was enacted, the amendment was made legal. You see the guys here dumping all this alcohol out of these barrels here. And this was actually the slide that we left off on the other day. I was talking about bootleggers, and the term bootleggers, generally it was guys, but guys and gals who were smugglers, smuggling beer or alcohol or liquor from other places, or from the illegal stills to the illegal bars, the speakeasies that they were called, and or they were trying to transport this alcohol just for themselves to go to maybe a party or whatever. And I mentioned the other day how this term bootleggers came about is they would actually fill these flasks that you see in the picture with liquor, alcohol, and then shove those in their socks or in their boots and hide the alcohol that way. So the term bootlegger comes from people who would smuggle alcohol. Sometimes they would smuggle the alcohol to the illegal bars, which are called speakeasies. And speakeasies quite often were very nondescript. You saw in one of the videos how sometimes they were just doors, businesses, no signs on them. Maybe you had to know somebody to be able to get in, or know the password, so to speak, to get in. And they weren't flashy places, but they were just a location where basically you could go and get a illegal drink during the Prohibition. One of the gangsters, probably the most famous gangster of the Prohibition era, the 1920s, was Al Capone of Chicago. He was nicknamed Scarface because of a cut he received in his earlier days. Al Capone has quite a story. He rose up as a young gangster. He was an enforcer and basically a murderer for another mob boss, and worked his way up to becoming not just the mob boss of Chicago, but of the entire United States. Most well known, he was a very public person. In the readings you had the other day during asynchronous time, they talked about Al Capone having many public officials, judges, police officers on his payroll. He basically controlled the city of Chicago. He controlled all the alcohol that was being distributed in the city, and was very, very good at avoiding conviction. and the feds finally did catch up to him. He was eventually jailed, not for murder, not for assault and battery, not for illegal production and distribution of alcohol, but actually tax evasion. You know, they were able to be really smart about. I believe his public persona was that he was some sort of tradesman, like, for example, a plumber. But he also he lived in a mansion or a large apartment in Chicago, very expensive apartment. He also drove nice cars, always had an entourage with him. And so it wasn't that difficult to find a paper trail of money and how he was able to purchase a lot of these extravagant items on a plumber's salary. And so tax evasion is finally what caught up to Al Capone. And he eventually died while in prison. So I have a little video on Al Capone. We're actually going to watch it. Just a moment here. Let me go ahead and set that video up. No, you know what? I'm going to actually attach that video. Let's see if I can get my screen share back up. Here we go. I'll attach that video and we're going to watch that during the rest of the asynchronous time. So back to the next slide here. I'm going to talk about the Purple Gang on the next slide. So Al Capone, he had the Chicago part of the Midwest all locked up. But in Detroit, a little less famous, wasn't a single person. Al Capone in Chicago was kind of the leader, the face of the mob in Chicago. But in Detroit, Michigan's very own Detroit, had some gangsters, and they were called the Purple Gang. And the Purple Gang, actually, the Chicago mob that Al Capone led was Italians. Al Capone was Italian, and most of his organization was of Italian descent. The Purple Gang of Detroit actually were of Jewish descent, predominantly Jewish, rather than Italian. And Detroit was a big pipeline for alcohol because of its proximity to Canada, Windsor, Ontario, Canada, and just across the river. And so the Purple Gang was able to take care of the eastern part of the Midwest and bringing in alcohol from Canada. And what's interesting about the Purple Gang, lots of books and movies and documentaries about them, just like there are about Al Capone. Some say, if you were to read some of these books, they say the Purple Gang was even more notorious, more ruthless, more murderous than Al Capone's organization. So they're a little less known, but every bit as murderous and ruthless as Al Capone's outfit. One of the cool things is that you see here on the slide that the Purple Gang actually had a presence in the Roscommon, Grayling, Mayo area. There were places that they were known to frequent, nightclubs and so forth, speakeasies up in the area, the Au River, the Durant property off of the Au River, were all places, excuse me, that the Purple Gang was known to visit. So kind of cool stuff if you eventually study some history about our local area. You'll know that this is where they vacationed. This is where the Purple Gang came to relax. Our part of northern Michigan and the Au River area. Kind of cool stuff about the Purple Gang. Scopes trial. So during the 1920s, we had all this stuff going on with the prohibition of alcohol. We had the jazz music and the Harlem Renaissance and all of these big things going on and making it a very glorious time. But politically, we also had this struggle between evolutionists and the study of evolution versus what is said about how man was created through the Bible. And so the Scopes trial, there was this teacher, John T. Scopes, who taught the non-biblical version, the scientific version, which we call evolution, of how man evolved from earlier primates, monkeys, so to speak. It was nicknamed the monkey trial due to the claim that humans had evolved from monkeys, which scientists, anthropologists would tell you is true. And so this went against biblical teaching of Adam and Eve and the creation by God. And so it was actually outlawed. Teaching of evolution was outlawed in this state. And so it was a very famous trial. The trial was covered on the radio, all the newspapers, and very famous event that occurred during the 1920s. And I have a video that I would show you at this point in the lecture too, but I'm going to attach it to today's Google Classroom. So you'll watch it with today's Google Classroom after watching this video lecture. So the Scopes trial. Also the rise of the KKK, the rebirth, the second coming of the KKK. So the KKK, Ku Klux Klan, the racist organization that most of you probably have an idea or know what it is. The guys in the white capes and the hoods and so forth. And you know, they came about originally came about after the Civil War, but died off a little bit at the turn of the century, and now are experiencing in the 20s a big rebirth. And as you can see in the slide, the membership by 1922 increases to over 100,000. And immediately they start making an impact. Remember, this whole idea of the Great Migration also occurred during the 1920s, where blacks were looking for a better way of life that could be offered them in the very racist South. And so a lot of them moved up north. You know, manufacturing was starting to blossom in many of the Midwestern states. And so looking for jobs and so forth. And so many African Americans during the 1920s moved north. Matter of fact, there's a rich history in our state of Michigan, both the west side of the state and the east side of the state, where African Americans found homes, very specifically Grand Rapids and a little north of Grand Rapids, many African American communities, and in the city of Detroit, many African American communities that came about after this Great Migration. But Michigan also has a very racist path as well, and there were many KKK organizations, local organizations in Michigan as well. So the KKK experiences a great rebirth during the 1920s, often referred to as the second KKK. Okay, and that is the end of today's lecture. Go on to Google Classroom and finish up watching those videos.